Good. I'm so excited to introduce Alan Bell. Alan Bell's career spans printing, publishing, design, journalism, film production, film criticism, sociology, and social work. He currently specializes in graphic design for nonprofit organizations that serve the health, educational, and social needs of underserved communities. His film criticism has appeared in the Los Angeles Sentinel and the LA Times. Since 2010, he has led the nonprofit Los Angeles InDesign user group promoting collaboration, education, and graphic design. Yes. Alan will tell us how a 10-year-old black kid from the hood, fascinated by the technology of printing, discovered journalism and movie titles. He eventually became the publisher, editor, and designer of two groundbreaking LGBTQ publications, one on each coast, Gaysweek, the National Black LGBTQ Gaysweek, the only weekly LGBTQ mainstream newspaper at the time of its founding in 1977, and BLK, the first national black LGBTQ news magazine. Alan's early interest in printing became a lifelong passion for letterforms, design, and spreading the news. Give it up for Alan.
So how many of you have heard of InDesign? A few? Okay, we'll get there. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank John for talking about my work, including it in his presentation, and for both John and Ellen for inviting me here, because I've talked about the publications before, but generally I've talked about them as journalistic or archives, or I haven't talked about them as from a typographic point of view. And in going back and seeing what they saw, I made some connections that I hadn't made before. So first of all, my life is divided into three parts: Los Angeles, New York, and then Los Angeles again. So it starts out, as most things do, with my parents. My dad was a junk dealer. He would, if he was alive today, he would be selling and buying stuff on eBay. But back then, he would see stuff on the streets, and he would pick it up to sell it for scrap iron. And one of the things that he picked up was a printing press. And he's the hero of this story in a sense, because he decided that he was not going to sell it for scrap iron, that he was fascinated by it. And he had the mind, the kind of mind that just wanted to see how things work. And when he got the press, he determined that it needed metal type, he determined that it needed ink, he determined that it needed rollers and all of that, and he made it work. I sometimes say that if he had come up with a toy airplane, I'd be a pilot. But this is what he came up with. And over the years, I have progressed from learning about metal type and through all these technologies to InDesign. And we're going to talk about a few of them. So in case it wasn't clear how small that printing press was, now you know. And this isn't the actual press. That's been lost to history. But this is a real press from the LA Printing Museum that they loaned to me. That's the one. And it literally sat on our kitchen table in the kitchen. And again, this is not the actual one, but we did have a yellow Formica and chrome kitchen table. I mean, and from that, because both my dad and I were interested in printing, there were things that all of a sudden needed to be printed. It's kind of like if all you have is a hammer and nail, everything looks like a nail or looks like a hammer. And so all of a sudden, friends needed things to be printed. My parents were into Eastern Star on my mother's side and on the Masons on his side, and so all of these invitations and stuff that might have been hand done were now printed. And again, because at this point I'm interested in the technology of printing, but okay, so you need something to print, and there's only so many invitations you can print. And I came up with something called, or not came up with something, I discovered the American Amateur Press Association, which is this weird thing, which, you know, this is before the internet, right? And so it was for people like me who wanted to print something, but we didn't have anything to print or anybody to give it to. So we would print things, send it to the main office. The main office would take the assembled things that all the amateur printers printed, put it in an envelope, and then send it back to all the other members. And those were called bundles. And once a month, you got a bundle of what everybody else, what your peers were doing. And my first little tiny publication was called The Memo. And I don't know, it was 8 pages long or something like that. And it was in the AAPA bundle. So, printing, that's how it, you know, how it started out. But then this is one of the things that that from a graphic point of view just blew my mind. And the first part into movies, and this is my ringtone today. And not only is it my ringtone, but it was designed by Emil Clausa Jr., and music is by Alfred Newman. Emil is kind of interesting, as you'll see my career as I talk later on, because he was just a worker bee at 20th Century Fox. He was nobody special. And who would know that he would produce something that's still being seen today, when all it was just one more project. So, my life, printing, and movies. Now, this is one of the things that I hadn't thought about in years until I had to do this. My parents were entrepreneurs, and they started something called Bell Cleaners. And my dad hand-lettered Bell Cleaners on the window of the store. No background in letters, no background in typography. He took a brush and he hand-lettered it with drop caps. Right. And I remember him telling me about the drop caps, that it needed to be below and to the right or below and to the left, because he had that kind of mind, that he just figured it out. And when I go back and I look at this, yeah, typography was from the very beginning. So there was this entrepreneur streak that was going on as well, and this will figure on a little later as well. But they had the cleaners, and across the street there was a shoe repair store that was for sale because the guy had, I think he had passed on. And my parents had no particular interest or need for a shoe repair store, but it was for sale. And they decided that they were going to go ahead and purchase it. And so there's this example of entrepreneurship in my blood. So something just happened here. Let's see here. Okay, so junior high school. I take printing courses because now I'm into printing, but I'm starting now to be more into, okay, you have to print something. And so I become a member of the newspaper staff. This is a copy of the newspaper that was printed 4 times a year, 8.5 by 11. And part of the reason why it was printed 4 times a year, it was done with metal type, individual hand-set metal type. And it was mind-boggling that how that was done. And for those of you who are into printing who know what a mealy vertical is, that was the first time that I saw that kind of motorized printing press, and I was again fascinated, I think, like my dad was, of printing technology. So, obviously, then high school, I'm editor of the paper, and so this is blue and white. That's a picture of me a little younger in the lower right. The high school was a big deal for me. Because I gone to high school in the hood. Mom decided that I needed to go to high school across town, and that opened up a whole bunch of things for my life that I didn't know before. I remember one time going to high school and half the school was gone, and I didn't understand why. And I said, where is everybody? They said, well, it's a holiday. And I said, what holiday is, it's not a holiday, it's a Jewish holiday. And I had no clue of Jewish holidays. I mean, that's how much I didn't know as a high school student. But I also, at that particular time, saw West Side Story. And I was fascinated by West Side Story, both the titles, the beginning and end titles, and now, what's interesting about this is I made this parody of West Side Story called Midtown Story, which was 18 minutes long. But the titles, the end titles and the beginning titles were 1/3 of the film. That's a true story. I think I did it again. I think I know what I'm doing. I'm the person that's doing this. I think I'm hitting that by mistake. Okay. So about time of high school, I meet up with the ladies who run Another Mother for Peace. I have some what are becoming known as typesetting skills, and I work on their newsletter. Gerda Katz is one of the persons that kind of like taught me a little bit about design. She did not design the Another Mother for Peace logo at the top, War is Not Healthy for Children and Other Living Things, but together we did the newsletter that was done on a typewriter, an IBM executive typewriter with justified margins on the right, which means that I had to type everything twice to justify the margins. She did the hand lettering. Because I was working with them, and I'm starting to spread my wings and stuff, I came up with the one on the right. Didn't do anything with it, but it was kind of interesting. It's my first try, I think, at doing any kind of actual letter forms. I'm also a student at UCLA at this time, and so printing, movies, and journalism are now where I'm at. And at that particular time, I moved to New York. Now, I'm taking my typesetting skills in New York and doing the same thing that I did back then, doing work for friends and stuff, and I actually started a company called Typographics. And since it turned out that I was doing a typesetting for my community, for the gay community, that was the slogan. And you will see as we come through, the slogans are kind of something that I kind of like, I'm kind of into. You'll see some other slogans. I also, at this time, did a Christmas card. And this Christmas card is all the things that I liked at the time. And it's kind of interesting to go back and look at the things that I liked at that particular time. But once again, it's a typographic production that I hadn't thought about until this particular particular presentation. So At that particular time, I met Francis Green, who was doing Gay Yellow Pages on a typewriter. And my fledgling typesetting business has moved so that we have an IBM Selectric Composer, so it's an automated version of a typewriter for typesetting. And then I moved from that into actual, the beginnings of photo typesetting. I'm doing that in New York. And so we moved from Francis Green doing Gay Yellow Pages on a typewriter to actual photo typesetting. And it moved from 8.5 by 11 to the smaller one on the right. So about this time, I'm doing typesetting for a number of organizations in New York. And occasionally people will come to me and they'll say, hey, you know, we need a newspaper, because there wasn't a newspaper at the time. There was a monthly called Gay, but it wasn't a real newspaper. And I think there was 3 such tries for a newspaper. They never really happened. I think the last one, they did a couple of issues and then folded. And I have some background not only in typesetting and printing, some background in journalism, and these folks keep trying to start these newspapers and they keep failing. You know, it's kind of like, I can do this. And that was the beginning of Gaysweek. And the first issue of Gaysweek is on the left, and the last issue is on the right. And I want to go through this. We did an extra issue one week because there was a tragedy that happened in New York. So here we are with an all-volunteer operation of some 60 people doing a publication which was 16 to 32 pages every single week, and we got an extra one out that week. It was kind of based on the Village Voice, New York Magazine, New York Times, not so much doing what they want because they were perfect, but in an aspirational sort of way. We wanted to do what they should be doing. We saw ourselves in that model. And when I say that, you'll see on the one on the left talking about 100 things for gay people to do for under $1. I mean, that's very New York Magazine. But on the right, there's a very serious article about something that's going on in New Jersey. The logo for Gaysweek moved from the first one to the second one. By the way, we were sued by Newsweek, but we won. I remember when we were sued when I got the letter that we were being sued by Newsweek, I was running around the office saying, "We're being sued by Newsweek! Great, great, great!" We had a supplement that came out once a month called Arts and Letters, based on arts and leisure, New York Times again, but ours was better. And then I'm back in LA. When Gaysweek ended, it was all volunteer organization. I was actually homeless for the last 6 months of my stay in New York. And I come back to LA. I have typesetting skills now. Photo typesetting is just starting to take hold. And I get a job at High Speed Typesetting, which was a big deal typesetting company at that time. And they hired me as their production manager. I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. I bought a car, I bought a house. You know, things were good. It's kind of like, I do not need to work on another all-volunteer publication. I am just gonna, I'm gonna live my life this way. But after, and one of the things about working at High Speed is I learned a lot about design and typesetting at that particular time. Because at this particular time, design and typesetting were 2 separate skills. And designers would perhaps spec some type saying, 10 on 12 points, 18 picas wide, and they would give us the copy, and we would do that and give them a sheet that they give back to them for them to include in their layouts. And if they made a mistake, then they have to go back to us. We have to retypeset it, send it back to them. I suppose everybody in the audience can't imagine living in that world, but that was the world. That was the world then. But I was around some people who sometimes filled in the gaps for what the designers had in mind, because it would come to layout. And so they would say, hey, well, you're saying it needs to be 10 on 12, but we think it should be 10 on 13 for this particular, and if we and depending on the designer, some designers were very specific. I said 10 on 12. What part of 10 on 12 don't you understand? But others, would accept that. And one of the things about one of the people that I was working with who was doing proofreading, he came up and found a mistake. He said, this period, because it follows italic, should be an italic period, and you have a regular period. He actually did that. Afraid of him. So about this time, I am working on one of the clients that we had was Modern Film Effects, which was affiliated with Paramount Pictures, and they would send us in titles to typeset, and we would typeset the in titles and give them back the film for them to incorporate on an animation stand, and they would shoot the film that we got, and that became how the end titles were made. Now, the reason why I do that is because I was the guy who designed the end titles, because at that particular time, Paramount didn't care about the end titles. Modern Film Effects didn't care about the end titles. We just got a typewritten sheet, and they said, hey, this needs to be a half a screen, this needs to be a full screen, but what typeface do you want? We don't care. Helvetica. I don't care. What size should this be? Whatever you want, right? And so once we got Star Trek II, which is what this is from, it was the same thing. And I somehow, because it was kind of like a big picture, I thought, well, at least the end credits should at least somehow echo the main credits. I said, well, what do the main credits look like? And it's kind of like, dude, just do your job. We don't need to, But they sent it over to me, and Microgramma or Eurostyle was the closest to that. And so here's this kid like Emil Kosa designing the 20th Century Fox trademark. Here's me deciding what the typeface is for the end credits for Star Trek II. I also did some others at the time. Trading Places, which maybe you've heard of, 48 Hours. So there's a number of those that I did. But I bring this up because, and then I know I have to move on. Above the MPAA logo, we got that as a particular piece of VLOX, that we were just supposed to shoot it. But the numbers that's on the top of it were just generic numbers. So every time I got them with the numbers, I would replace the generic numbers with the typeface that I was using for those particular end credits. So, I'm a graphics guy, right? I'm a type guy. So if you go back and you look at Paramount Pictures from those particular times, if anybody was ever going to do that research, the ones that I did, the MPAA number would always match the font for the type. So I was starting myself as a typesetter. I'm now becoming a designer, and then there's the journalism part that's coming on, and I know I have to rush through this. And I'm back in LA. like I said, no more publications and stuff like that. But, I'm a gay man, and I decided that I wanted a directory of where gay men meet each other, and there wasn't such a directory. So I crowdsourced it, even though I didn't know what crowdsourcing was at that particular time. I put an ad in a newspaper, said, hey, tell me your places that you know, and I'll put them in a publication and send it back to you. And that was called Public Places. And that was the first thing that I did when I got the first publication thing I did back in LA. From this, the next thing that I did was the AIDS crisis is starting to take hold at this particular time. It was just in its early stages in New York when I was there, but in Los Angeles, it's now getting more serious. I'm doing some typesetting work for the Minority AIDS Project and other, community organizations, and I decide, well, folks are into safer sex, but these posters that say, wear a condom, they're kind of boring. Yeah, I know we need to do that, but there needs to be something else. And I said, well, wouldn't it be great if there was a whole a place, a space, where everybody in the room believed in safer sex. We didn't need to convince those folks that safer sex was a thing to do. And so I started a club called Blackjack. And this was for black men who understood and who were into safer sex. Now, Blackjack needed some flyers. The flyers were really good. And they got better over time. And then I decided that Blackjack needed a newsletter. And then the newsletter was front and back, and then the newsletter was 4 pages, and then the newsletter was 16 pages and had classified ads. And lo and behold, I'm into it again. So I hadn't really wanted to do it. It just happened in the back door. But at the same time, there's no black gay publication in Los Angeles at the time. But I'm doing work for Minority AIDS Project, for Jewel Williams, Black Gay and Lesbian Leadership Forum, and they're coming to me and say, hey, Alan, why don't you start a newspaper? No, been there, done that. I am not doing that again. Look, I got this really neat car and house. I don't need to do that again. But I did it. And the one on the left is the first issue of BLK, and the one on the right is the last. The two of the issues that I am particularly, well, there's several issues, but the one on the left is probably one of the most significant issues that we did. It's one that talks about HIV in a very complete and rigorous way. It talks about how HIV is rooted in cultural and norms and government expectations and all the stuff that we know now, all the stuff that was made clear through COVID. We talked about that back then. And I'm really proud of that issue. But at the same time that we were doing issues like that, the issue on the right is with a porno star who was popular at the time. We did an interview with him. He talked about HIV as well. These are two of the other issues that I am proud of. Audre Lorde. And for those of you who don't know Audre Lorde, think about Martin Luther King of the black lesbian community. That's a shorthand. And there's still kind of like the New York Magazine part of me. The issue on the right is the 10 best places for black LGBT people to work. And that was useful, not like the 100 for under $1. That was really useful, and it took some research and some doing to be able to do it. The guy who did it, he's really a hero. And he came up with the 10 best places, and there was a second 10, and then there were some honorable mentions, and then at the end there was like 5 or 6 places where don't even think about working there. They won't like you. And for those of you who are wondering, what he came up with is IBM at the time was the best place to work. And one final thing on typography, when I was putting this together, I was looking at the bottom of the one on the right, saying that should not, those lines at the bottom should not have been green, they should have been white. And I so wanted to change them to white, but I left them alone. So again, these are kind of things I was looking to when I was working on BLK. Again, not that they were perfect, but the kinds of things that were in my mind. That was intentional, of course. I wanted to jumpstart BLK, not copy it, but make it seem familiar. And we used that BLK thing for all of our column headings. Some of them had double meanings, which was intentional and kind of fun. Our gossip column was called Black Tea, and again, this is one of the things that probably nobody figured out, but Gertrude Gibson was the gossip columnist of the local straight black paper, and the person that did our column, Preston Guider, is an anagram of Gertrude Gibson's name. Back to slogans. This was the slogan for BLK. And we had cartoons, the idea stolen from New York Magazine, or from the New Yorker, but these are some examples of the cartoons that we had. And they were really, really popular at the time. I wanted the cartoons, and the guy who drew, I wrote all the captions, and then there was a guy who drew the drawings based on the captions that I wrote. I did not have him for the first issues of BLK, and so in the beginning we stole the drawings from Ebony, and I rewrote the captions to match existing drawings. And I think we did that for 3 issues or so. I got a letter from Ebony saying, don't do that. But by that time, I had found Arthur Benninger. So more cartoons. He wanted a book. We never got one. There were other publications that we did at the same time. This is for black men. It was kind of Playboy, but erotic. There was Black Lace for women, similar, but it wasn't Playgirl. And then there was a poetry journal. And again, we did a travel guide, which was that, and some other things that we did. I'm almost done here. Okay, Mentor was available for sale, like my parents and the shoe repair store across the way. And once I found out it was for sale and it was cheap, I bought it. So these days after BLK, I'm doing magazines, reports, and books and all of that. None of that's here because any good movie, you have to save something for the sequel, so you won't see any of that. However, one of the things that I did do was there was some talk about playing the race card at the time, and I just kind of thought that was a kind of interesting thing, and so I wanted to turn that on its head and make playing the race card being a symbol of inclusivity. So I actually designed a race card, which is there. But the problem was that after I designed a race card, what do you do with race cards? It's kind of like, yeah, I thought of it, so I have it now, but there's no way to really use it until maybe today. I've had to print 1,000 of them. Literally, they have been on my shelf, and if anybody wants a race card, let me know. I have them in my back pocket. I had the Los Angeles InDesign user group, which now is the only user group left, so we changed our name to Last Adobe InDesign User Group. laidug.com, you can find it online. And finally, we don't have time, but part of the reason why I think all this is important is for history. It's for, as I say, 50 years from now, somebody's going to go to a library and they're going to look up BLK or Gaysweek to see what folks were doing back 50 years ago. And I hope they find us and what we did is shows them a good picture of what the communities were at that time. And finally,